I sent you over. One second. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dario. I'm the head of research, and I'm going to be your host today. Apologies for the delays. We had some technical difficulties with Hangout on Air, so hopefully you're all on the right Hangout. I want to say a few words before I introduce Leila, who's going to present today. This is going to be a special edition of the showcase. We're going to have the full hour for presenting these results. And the reason why we decided to allocate all this time to this project is twofold. First off, this is the first time that in years, at least since I've been around, we're going to present results on a large-scale reader segmentation. The reason why there hasn't been any such research in the past is twofold. We didn't have for years like the technical capacity to collect and analyze this data. Also, I guess from a strategic perspective, a focus for the past couple of years has been on editors primarily, and there's been a renewed interest in understanding readers and our reach. Most recently, I want to say the past year or 2 years have been particularly focused on this aspect of our audiences. And you probably attended the new readers presentation that looked at new audiences, especially in the global south, that we're trying to better understand. And today we're going to focus on like a study using a combination of mixed methods, both quantitative and qualitative, on Wikipedia. The second reason why I'm very excited about today's presentation is that this is a multi-center presentation. So it's actually a collaboration between Wikimedia Research, Stanford University, GESIS, and EPFL. And it's been a project in the working for about a year now, also in collaboration with the reading team at the foundation. And so I want to call out the fact that many people worked on this, and I'm very excited about the results we're going to hear from Leila. So with that, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Dario. Yes, my name is Leila Zia. I'm a senior research scientist at Wikimedia Foundation's research team. And as Dario said, this is what I'm going to be talking about today is the study that we did over the past year to understand Wikipedia readers, a formal collaboration with folks at Stanford University, GESIS, and EPFL, as well as the reading team at the Wikimedia Foundation. with huge support from both security teams and legal. Okay, let's get started. So why readers? So Dario touched on this a little bit. I'm just going to show you a few numbers and we do an exercise together and then we move on. 610 million people page views came to Wikipedia on October 30th, 2016. 85% of these page views were from users, meaning humans, versus bots and spiders. And we here are pretty much used to these numbers. So we look at these numbers, 610 million, and we see a lot of it, and we're almost, I would say, numb about it. We're used to it. So I would like to walk us through one exercise. So blink your eyes once. And now during this time, 2,000 Wikipedia pages were requested by humans. And we don't know why. So this will have impact on the way we provide educational content for the people who come to Wikipedia to access the content that we are providing to them. And it will also have impact on the way we disseminate this content globally, both for the foundation and also for the communities who are working on creating this content and working on disseminating it. I won't spend much more time on convincing why it's important to focus on readers, at least for a bit. So let's understand Wikipedia readers. We're not operating in a vacuum. So there is a literature in research and more recently in the foundation to try to understand the intentions, motivations, and behaviors of users in general. So on the web, motivations and user behavior has been studied extensively. You see a lot of studies around the web itself, the search engines, social media such as Twitter and Facebook. On Wikipedia, we mostly have focused traditionally on editors for a variety of reasons that Dario mentioned a few of them. We have studied editor motivations. We have also studied their editing behavior. We know much less about Wikipedia readers. We know there's a little bit about their content preferences. We know the search queries that bring them to Wikipedia. We also know their navigation patterns through a series of studies. And then more recently, the foundation has started the project on new readers, trying to understand who are the readers that we haven't reached out to. So basically, these are people who don't know that Wikipedia exists, and we want to bring them to Wikipedia, or they're using Wikipedia, but they don't know that they're using Wikipedia. So that's the focus of the last research. So our contributions to this literature are going to be the three following. We're building a robust taxonomy for characterizing the use cases that people come to Wikipedia for. We use this taxonomy, and then through a series of large-scale surveys, we quantify the prevalence and interactions between these use cases. And then we go one level deeper. We enhance our understanding of Wikipedia readers by looking at web request logs on top of the survey responses to try to understand more who are these Wikipedia readers who come to Wikipedia. So I'll talk about the first part, building a robust taxonomy. And by the way, this talk is naturally divided to three parts because of the three contributions. I'll stop at the end of each section and you can ask questions so that we don't collect everything for all the way to the end. Also, if you have questions that stop you from understanding what I'm saying, just stop me at the point that I'm saying it. Otherwise, keep it for the break at the end of that part. Okay, so we want to build a robust taxonomy of Wikipedia readers' use cases, but we don't know where to start. We have a few places we can start from. One of them is web request logs. So each time that you request a page on Wikipedia, the foundation servers receive a hit. And in that hit, there's information about the IP address of that requested the page, the user agent, and a variety of other kinds of information, where the request has come from, what time of the day the request has been made, and so on. So we collect these logs. And the problem that we have is that these logs don't necessarily tell us why people come to Wikipedia. We're receiving around 100,000, more than 100,000 requests per second to our servers. And looking at this body of data and trying to make sense of why people come is not very easy. It's impossible unless you have some hints about why people are coming. So the other way we can get the information that we are looking for is that we can ask people. At least maybe if you ask people, they will provide some information. And with that information, you can go back to the logs and make sense of the immense amount of data that we're receiving. So we're going to be using surveys for the first part of this talk. we want to build the initial taxonomy using a survey. We run a survey on English Wikipedia for 4 days at a rate of 1 out of 200. So for every 200 requests, we take 1, and this request will be eligible to participate in the survey. The survey will run on English, mobile and desktop, and only on article pages. So we're not going to be showing the survey on talk pages, search pages, main page, anything like that. We run the survey and we collect 5,000 responses on desktop and then 1,655 on mobile. So let me just show you how this survey looked like. So you're on Leonard Cohen's page on English desktop, or you're on his page on mobile. If you have been selected to participate as part of the survey, what you will see is at some point there's a widget will pop up. If you're on desktop, the widget will pop up on top of the info box on the right-hand side on English Wikipedia. If you're on mobile, it will show up in the bottom, basically after the info box. So you have to scroll down before seeing the survey. The survey will tell you one thing: answer one question and help us improve Wikipedia. You have an option to say visit survey or say no thanks. You will see in the bottom that says survey handled by a third party, because the question will be handled on Google site. And there's a link to the privacy statement for the survey. If you say that you want to visit the survey, this is what you see. See, why are you reading this article today? So we are asking you to tell us why you are on Leonard Cohen's page today. And you have 100-character limit to explain to us in words why you are here. There's a reason that we ask the question this way, as opposed to showing options to the user that they can choose from, which would be much easier for the user. The reason is that we don't want to basically imply our own biases on how people should be using Wikipedia at large to users. So we want to ask them why they are here. So just to give you a sense of the kind of responses we received, here's how it looks like. So these are actual user responses. Personal interest about conflicts in Middle East. So I can see the country's population. New York Times today mentioned Operation Wetback, alluded by Trump in a debate, and wanted to learn more. Confirming address for shipment going to this town. Studying for my med school test. Interest and curiosity. Because I'm in a very boring art lesson. To find out more information about this aircraft. Someone came by my desk talking about the Last Man on Earth movie, so I looked it up. I had previously edited it to see a movie summary. So I didn't show you a lot of the funny ones that we received, right? So we received around between like 3 to 6% also funny responses. But I'm not showing you those, though the numbers were pretty low, but they're also fascinating on their own. But this is to give you a sense of what we saw. So what can we do with this? We received a lot of text from people in English, and they're very different. So usually when you have a lot of text available to you, you do hand coding. So what we did is that 5 researchers paired up, and we did 1 round of hand coding with the following approach. We chose 20 responses, 20 free-form text responses at random from the 7,000, almost 7,000 that we had collected. And then each of us went over them individually, and then we talked to each other about these 20 responses to basically create an initial alignment among ourselves. Then what we did is that we decided that each of us are going to randomly choose 100 of the responses. So this would be 500 responses. And then we're going to generously assign tags to these responses. We did that exercise, and then we reviewed the tags. And what we learned is that there are 4 main trends that people try to communicate with us when we ask them about why they're on Wikipedia. And then we took these tags and we basically went to a 3rd stage. We did another 500 of hand coding, and then we checked whether any new tags should be added. What we learned was the answer was no. So basically, and also we could reduce the 4 tags to 3 tags. So let me show you one example. So this person had said to evaluate technical description of Bosch fuel injection system installed on a car I'm interested in. So one of the researchers who was assigned to tag this had said deep dive, shopping, technical. And then in the last round, we decided that this is about decision making and in-depth reading. So we did this for 1,020 responses. And the output is, here's what we learned. What we learned is that when you ask people why they're on Wikipedia, they communicate with you about 3 dimensions. One of them is information need. They will tell you how much information they need. They will tell you whether they're here for a quick fact lookup, overview, or in-depth reading. They also tell you about their prior knowledge, some of them. They will tell you whether they're familiar with the content that they're reading or not familiar with it. And the last thing they talk to you about is their motivation. They talk about whether they have a work or school project coming up, a personal decision, whether a current event has triggered their visit to Wikipedia, media trigger, a conversation trigger. Somebody walked up to my desk and said this, and now I'm looking it up. Whether they're bored or randomly exploring Wikipedia for fun, or whether they're here just because they like learning and they're doing intrinsic learning. So these are the 3 main, what we call dimensions. And each of them, what is inside a dimension, from now on, I will call it category. Correct. So the question is that how did we infer motivation? Because some of the responses that we showed, you could not tell anything about what the motivation of the person is. And we did not assign motivation to those. So that would be not available. If that information is not available for that, we would just say it's not available. Okay, so now we have these 3 dimensions plus their categories, but we don't know if these are robust or not, right? So we ran the survey on English Wikipedia. So what we did is that we went to 2 other languages, Persian and Spanish Wikipedia, and we ran the same survey on these 2 languages. We asked people in their own language, why are you reading this article today? And what we learned after hand coding of the responses from those languages is that at least in these 2 languages, the tags, the categories and dimensions that we observe from English also apply to these languages. It can be that the distribution changes when you go from one language to the other, but the same tags apply. The other thing that we wanted to test is whether the same categories and dimensions identified would stay robust in English Wikipedia. So we ran a 3-question survey on English Wikipedia. We asked people about the depth of information they're looking for, their prior knowledge, and their motivations. And as options, we gave them the categories that you saw in the previous slide as options. So now they had to deal with a multiple choice question. What we did here is that for each of the questions, we add an other tag. So this would allow the user to say, none of these motivations that you're showing me is the one that I'm looking for. I'm going to choose other, and I'm going to tell you what that other is. So there was also a free form text associated with this other that they could tell us. What we learned is that only 2.3% of the responses chose other, which meant that for us, that the categories and options that we were making available to the users were robust. And we also studied what is in the other. When people choose other, what other responses they give. And we realized that all of those responses could be captured by the categories that were being shown to the user. It can be that the user didn't really have enough time to read it, or for whatever reason, they didn't choose the option that was available to them and they went with other. Okay, so this is the end of the first part. To conclude, we built a robust taxonomy of Wikipedia readers through a series of large-scale surveys. We showed that there are 3 dimensions that are important when we think about readers: their information need, their prior knowledge, and their motivation. Now, I'm going to move to the second part right now, but before going to there, I would like to pause here for a few minutes and let you ask any questions. Also, for people on IRC, if you have any questions, Ellery can take questions.
Any questions from the room? I have the mic here. Or IRC. So I guess we'll continue.
Okay, all here. So we built a taxonomy. We have these 3 dimensions and the categories in them. And now we want to understand what percentage of the reader population falls in each of these categories. So we want to quantify the prevalence and interactions between these use cases that we identified. So what we did is that we ran another survey. This was the duration of the survey was 1 week. The sampling rate was 1 out of 50 requests on English Wikipedia, mobile and desktop, on article pages. And this time, if you had a do not track option on your browser, we would not show the survey to you, and we would not basically study your data. We collected 29,372 responses from users. And here are the questions that the users saw. So basically, after they would approve that, yes, visit the survey, they would see 3 questions. The top is basically the description of the survey. Why are you reading this article today? The first question is, I'm reading this article to look up a specific fact or get a quick answer, get an overview of the topic, get an in-depth understanding of the topic. So this is kind of the depth of information. Prior to visiting this article, I was not familiar with the topic and I'm learning about it for the first time, or I was already familiar with the topic, and user could also not choose anything here. And the last one is about motivation. I'm reading this article because you could choose. The topic was referenced in a piece of media. I need to make a personal decision based on this topic. I'm bored or randomly exploring Wikipedia for fun. The topic came up in a conversation. I have a work or school-related assignment. I want to know more about a current event. This topic is important to me, and I want to learn more about it, and then other. And just for your information, we randomly shuffled the question sequence and also the responses, just to make sure that, you know, if people are randomly responding, we can capture that in the, when we do the analysis. I'm going to show you the results of the responses to these questions, plus some of the correlations. But before going to there, I want to have one slide talking about bias. So as any other empirical analysis, we will suffer from bias in responses. The bias can show itself in many different forms. For example, those who had longer sessions had a higher chance of seeing the survey widget. So this means that, for example, if you have come, if you're in Wikipedia and your motivation is a conversation you had with your friend and you quickly want to look up a fact, we will have a lower chance of showing you the survey because you were there only for one or two pages. There's also the fact that other kinds of bias. If you have a deadline tomorrow and we ask you to participate in a survey, you may be more likely or less likely to participate, depending on whether you want to procrastinate or not. And there are other kinds of biases that will show themselves in this data. Some of them we will be able to capture and address, and some of them we won't be able to. So just keep that always in the back of your mind. Bias is there. What we did for the part of the bias that we could control for was using inverse propensity score weighting. I'm not going to go through the details of the method, but just think about it this way. Suppose a user subpopulation, for example, students, were twice sampled in the survey pool than they truly exist in the reader population. So now we have 50% more than we usually have students in the sample that we created for this survey. What this approach does is that it takes the responses from the students and it will basically multiply them by a factor of half. So it will fix for the fact that these people were overrepresented in the sample that we took. And then you can see the result of this fixing in the following slides. Okay, so the first question was about information need. On the x-axis, you see the 3 options that were available to the user: overview, fact, and in-depth, and no responses. On the y-axis, you see what percentage of responses had come from which category, for which category. So for example, you see that, let's say 21% of people had said that they do in-depth reading. The 2 different colors, basically blue, which is the left bar, is the actual survey response. And the green one is the survey response after we fixed for bias. So you can see that in this plot, there's not much difference between the bias correction responses and the true responses that we got from the survey. So for the rest of the slides, let's just focus on the corrected responses. Okay, so there's one interesting thing that we see here, and that is only 21% are coming for in-depth reading. 77% in total are coming for overview and quick facts. And also keep that in the back of your mind. This is based on English Wikipedia data. Prior knowledge. The population is pretty split. 50% are familiar with a topic that they're reading about, and 47% are not. And now motivation. So in motivation, what you see basically on the x-axis, you have media, intrinsic learning, conversation, all the 7 motivations that we saw, plus no response. And what you see here is that, let's say 32% of the responses in the survey were motivated, basically visits to Wikipedia for that article were motivated by media. Right? So the person has read a book, watched a movie, read news in newspaper, or whatever other source of media, and that's the reason that they're coming to Wikipedia for. And you can see, one thing that is interesting to see here is that Wikipedia is being used for a variety of use cases. And no use case is really dominant. You don't see a sudden drop anywhere. We have a gradual drop, and it seems that the website is being used for all these different reasons. It seems media is pushing for a lot of it, but the drop is pretty gradual. The other thing that you will observe here is the effect of correcting for bias. So you see that people who are coming for conversation, if we would not fix for the bias issue, we would see a lower representation of them in the survey data. But after the fixing, we see more of it. And that's our hypothesis is what I said earlier. So basically, those who are in conversations with other people, they want to do a quick lookup and they want to go. Now, if you show them a survey, they won't participate, or they will have a lower chance of even participating, seeing the survey in the first place. Okay, so how do motivations change by day and time? And by the way, we looked at the prior knowledge changes by day and time, and information need changes by day and time. Those don't change so much, so I'll be just talking about motivation. So generally, let me actually first walk you through what this plot is. So on the x-axis, you see the days of the week, Monday through Sunday. On the y-axis, you see the share of motivation for that day. So on Monday, if you look at this blue bar on top, plot on top, what you see is that 30% of the people who come on Wikipedia on Mondays are motivated by media. And then you can see, for example, 10% of them are motivated by personal decisions. What you see generally is that these figures don't go that much up and down. So the motivations pretty much stay stable with a few exceptions. One is work or school related, and that's the drop that you see here. So basically during the week, people come for work or school, and then as you hit Saturday, it goes down, Sunday, it goes up a little bit, and then it goes back up on Monday. You also see that conversations start picking up on Friday. So that also goes with what we expect to see. People go Friday nights, start socializing more, seeing more friends and all that. And then on Saturday and Sunday, you see also a conversation being higher chance of being a trigger for people coming to Wikipedia. And then the last one, which has some difference, is media itself, right? So on Saturdays and Sundays, it seems people they have more access to media, and that seems to be a stronger trigger than during the weekdays. We did a similar analysis for hours of the day. So this is basically midnight all the way back to midnight. Again, the motivations are pretty stable, except for work, school. I mean, you see that pretty much starting 6 a.m., things start picking up, and it stays pretty stable until 6 p.m., and then it starts dropping. You also see media basically starting to go down as you go towards the early hours of the day. And then after basically starting 6 p.m., it starts going up again. Okay, so now let me show you a few correlations here that can be interesting. What you're seeing here is motivation versus information need. So here you have the 7 motivations that we have. And here are the 3 information needs that people could choose from in the survey. How you should read this is as follows. So let's look at the first line together. This is telling you that 38% of the people who chose media as their reason for coming to that article were there to do a quick lookup or a fact check. 19% were there to do in-depth reading, and 43% were there to do overview. The number in parentheses will show you the lift. So this says that people who are doing overview, you're 12% more likely to be coming by a motivation triggered from media than everybody else. So there are a few interesting things to observe here. Those who come with conversations as their trigger, they're mostly looking for facts, quick lookups. Those who come for work and school, they're also looking for quick lookups. For in-depth reading, basically people who are doing intrinsic learning are mostly focusing on that. And overview is mostly represented in people coming from media and those who are bored or are randomly exploring Wikipedia. And by the way, the last column shows whether the result is significant or not, and the degree of significance. So the next one is motivation versus prior knowledge. So basically did the same thing. We just changed the column to prior knowledge, familiar, unfamiliar. As you can see, the lift is not that different in this case. There are two exceptions. One is that if you're doing intrinsic learning, you're more likely to be familiar with the content that you're reading. And if you're coming because of media as your trigger, you're more likely to be unfamiliar with the topic that you're reading about. Okay, I'm gonna finish the second part here. So what we did here was that we ran a survey on the taxonomy that we built in part 1. And what we observed was that English Wikipedia is consulted for a variety of use cases. There's no single dominant use case that people come here to Wikipedia for. We observed also that shallow information needs, meaning overview and fact lookups, are 77% of our requests and are part of our responses, versus 21%, which is in-depth reading. We observed that readers have nearly identical shares in being familiar with the topic that they're reading about versus being unfamiliar. And we also observed that there are differences between extrinsic and versus intrinsic motivations. So extrinsic triggers are media, conversations, work and school, and current event, and the number in parentheses shows you what percentage of the responses came from there. While intrinsic triggers were intrinsic learning, bored and randomly exploring Wikipedia, and personal decision with the associated numbers. I am going to stop here and give you a few minutes to ask questions if you want about the second part, which was running the survey and understanding these numbers.
Yeah, so we have several questions on IRC. So I'm going to ask Ellery to relate them, and then we can take questions from the room.
Sure. So the first question was why we chose Persian and Spanish Wikipedia to sort of verify the taxonomy.
Right. We wanted to do this quick, and we wanted to do this in languages that we can quickly hand code. That's one reason. And Persian is a language I speak, and Spanish was a language that we could easily use Google Translate, and also we had resources internally to ask for translation. There was another reason for the choice of these languages. We wanted to have at least one language which is pretty much contained in one country. So that would be Persian, and like Iran, the associated country, a country which is potentially culturally different from, let's say, for example, US. And Spanish would be another language which is similar to English. So many people from many parts of the world speak Spanish, but this population has probably a very different culture than the general representation that we have in English Wikipedia. So these were the two reasons.
And then Giovanni was asking about a bit more detail on the inverse propensity score weighting. So one of his questions was, how did we choose the weights in the,
Okay. Yeah, I can expand on that. So basically what we did is that we built a prediction model. So we have two populations, people who participated in the survey and everybody else, the general Wikipedia reader population. So what we did is that we built a prediction model based on the set of features that you will see actually in the next section that I will talk about. And using those features, we predicted whether the user belongs to one group versus the other, basically whether the user is a survey participant or not. And then the weights, basically the probability that they show up in the survey, come from that prediction model. Good question. We tried to keep that under the rug for this part.
Okay, that's it from IRC. We have one question from the room.
So in the second part, in the survey, you had an other box. I was just curious about what other things came in to that other box. Were there any patterns there?
Yeah, good question. So we actually checked those again to see if we can identify anything around the robustness that would question what we did in the first part, and we couldn't identify anything. So it seems that people were still using it around, I would say 3%, 4%. And what was in the box for other was still something that they could choose from the options that are available to them. That's another topic, that there may be sometimes language barriers, right? We say something, we say, for example, intrinsic learning, but what does that really mean? We try to make it as simple as possible for the audience, but especially for English Wikipedia, because the audience is so broad, people interpret different questions differently, and that can be part of the reason that they choose other.
Other questions from the room? Yeah, Tilman.
I have a question about the second result, about the shallow information needs are more frequent than in-depth, right? So this is about per participant, right? Per participant. And I'm just kind of curious if any insights, or maybe this is for the next section when you discuss the traces, but how that would look like if you weigh by overall amount of usage, time spent, or pages viewed. Because I understand I can only participate in a survey with one page view, right? If I come back, if I'm a power user with 50 page views, I only get asked once. And if I'm an info user with one page view, I only get asked once. Any insights on this?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you more, and I'll talk about it in the next section. But basically, for information need and familiarity with the topic, as you will, I will talk about in the subgroup analysis in the next section, but there were no strong statistically significant differences between the people who were doing in-depth reading and other types of knowledge-seeking reading that we could identify from the data. But yeah, I will mention this in the next section.
More question from RSC, namely, what was the response rate for the survey?
That's, I think Ellery can correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't know this, right? Because we did not collect who did not respond to the survey.
Well, we could look into the number of survey impressions there were and compare that to the number of responses. Right. I don't know.
Yeah, so so our answer is we don't know it. Okay, good. Let's go to the last part. So now we did the survey on English Wikipedia, and then what I showed you in the previous section was basically the response distribution, the correlation, some descriptive statistics about what's happening, what was happening with the survey responses. Now we have the luxury of going deeper. We can look at the web request logs of the people who participated in the survey and try to understand more about these people, because now they have provided a valuable set of information to us about how much information they're looking for and also why they're here. So maybe if you go back to the web request logs, we can do something more. So we used 4 categories of features to make sense of web request logs and the survey responses that we were seeing. So basically from the survey itself, we have 3 features: motivation, which tell us why the user is here; information need, what depth of information the user is looking for; and prior knowledge. Because the user has requested a page on Wikimedia servers, we also know the country the request was associated with, the continent, the local time the user was in the week, the local time in hour, the host that the user has requested, has sent the request to, and the referrer class. We also know on which article we have shown the survey to the user. We also know what other articles the user has visited in the session the survey was shown to the user. So we have a variety of information about the kind of articles that the user has read. More specifically, we know the in degree, out degree, page rank, text length, page views, topics, and topic entropy. I won't be talking about these last 2 in this talk, but basically we had to build topical models for the articles and measure the entropy of the articles for saying some of the things that you will see later. And the last feature that was available to us is the session or activity of the user, right? So we know the session length these are all related to the session in which the widget was shown to the user. We know the session length, we know the session duration, average dwell time, average page rank difference, average topic distance, referrer class frequency, session position, number of sessions, and then number of requests. So we have all these features available to us. And what we want to do is what is called subgroup discovery. So here's how it works. For each survey question response, we form a target. A target is basically, let's say, as an example, people who have chosen motivation equals to work and school. This means that we're going to focus on this population right now, and we're trying to see what kind of behavioral patterns we see in this specific population, which is different than the rest of the population. Right? So we focus on work and school, and then we look at everything that's happening in work and school, and we compare this with everybody else, and see if work and school has some characteristics which are different than the rest of the people. So for example, for work and school, it can be that we observe that they have larger share of long sessions when you compare them with the rest of the population. So subgroup analysis, and this goes, I think, partly to what Tillman was asking. When you do subgroup analysis and information need, basically you have three targets. One of them are people who have chosen the information to be in-depth reading. One of them who have chosen information need to be summary or an overview. And the last one, the set of population that has chosen quick lookup, right? So for each of these, we did subgroup analysis. And what we learned is that the subgroups are pretty homogeneous across these three different groups. One thing we observe is that users from Asia describe their information needs significantly more often as in-depth. Now, we don't know why this is happening. We know that a lot of requests from Asia come from India. So this may be something that we want to keep an eye on. But because we have a lot of representation from India, it can be that for some reason, this result, we cannot say that this is true for Asia. We need to look at the data more. We may need to do further analysis, and this is something you should keep an eye on and bring it up if you're more interested in. But this is one thing we observe. And there is this kind of anecdotal, not evidence, almost like the stereotype that we think about, right? We think that in the US, people do a lot of quick lookups and fact checks, right? And we hypothesize that maybe in other countries, people do more in-depth reading, right? And this seems to be signaling in that direction, but we don't know it. We need to look into it more. We also know that obtaining overview is more common among desktop users. This is, again, something which is not very intuitive. If you would ask me before running the survey, for example, I would say people who are on mobile should do more of overview than people who are on desktop. This can be partly because of the features that we offer on mobile devices, but there may be also other reasons there. And we also see that fact-checking is more often observed in topics that are related to sports. So these are the kind of the significantly different results that we could see in the information need category. Then we did subgroup analysis on prior knowledge. So we have two targets here, people who are familiar with the topic and people who are not familiar with the topic. For users that are familiar with the topic, we noticed that topics that are read by these users are more spare time oriented. So they're sports, 21st century, TV, movie, and novels. We also see that topics that are read by these users are mostly popular topics. These are topics that have a lot of page views on Wikipedia. They tend to read articles that are longer and are more central in the link network of Wikipedia. Now, this is pretty much what we can understand about prior knowledge when we do subgroup analysis about prior knowledge and information need. When you go to motivation, more interesting things happen. Now, I'm going to show you on this slide two examples of what you can learn when you look at motivation. So let me first walk you through how to read this table. So this basically T is the target. It says that the target is all the people who have chosen motivation equal to work school. Right? And it says that the probability, basically the share of these people in the survey was 19.5%. 19.5% of the people had chosen this motivation as their reason for coming to that article when we took the survey. Now, let's focus on a subgroup. One of the subgroups that we have are articles that are around the topics which are focused on mathematics. What this is telling you here, 7.9%, is telling you that 7.9% of the articles that the survey widget was shown on was on the topic of mathematics. And then what you have as P S given T or T given S, these are basically conditional probabilities of the subgroup given that you're in that motivation target, or vice versa. And you see the lift. So basically what you see here, we're only showing you the significant results. We tested, basically we looked at, say, hundreds of subgroups, and this is what comes out. People who have chosen motivation, their motivation to be work or school, tend to be mostly focusing on 4 categories of articles or topics. These are articles which are focused on mathematics, war and history, technology, biology and chemistry, literature and art. What you see also here for the 2 top categories is that the lift is more than 2, which means that you're twice more likely to be reading a mathematics-related article or war or history-related article when you are motivated by a work or school trigger. We also see that you're coming mostly from desktop. So that's another thing we observe. We observe few other things. You do, your session duration is more than 6 minutes. These numbers are in minutes. And average time difference is telling you how much, on average, the user spends time on an article, which is between 3 minutes and 9 minutes, basically 9 up, which is telling you that these users are spending quite substantial amount of time on articles. The number of referrer being searched is telling you that, and being greater than 2, is telling you that these are the users who go in and out of Wikipedia often. So these people don't stay on the site. They go probably to Google and come back to us with another query. Now let's look at the other extreme. These are, this subgroup analysis is for the users who have been motivated by bored and random as their motivation for coming to Wikipedia. And what you see here, interestingly, is that these are the users who stay on Wikipedia. They don't tend to go in and out so much. They come to Wikipedia, they stay here, and they read. They use the internal ways for navigating Wikipedia to learn more or to read. They also tend to be fast readers. They have the number of requests that we receive from these people is more than 8, meaning that they go from page to page to page. They focus on 3 main topics, and these are sports, 21st century, TV, movie, and novels. And the average topic distance for these people is more than 1, which means these people actually change topics also very frequently. They don't necessarily stay on one topic. They don't start with sport and stay in sport. They start from sport and they end up somewhere else. Okay, so I throw at you a lot of data and knowledge. Let's step back and summarize. What we built is that we built a taxonomy of Wikipedia readers. We know that we need to focus on the information need, prior knowledge, and the motivations of the users. We quantified the prevalence of each of these dimensions and the categories in these dimensions, and the interactions between the use cases. And then we went a little bit deeper by looking at the web request logs to try to understand these people in the context of different sessions, articles, or requests that they have sent to us. And now, what are the implications of this kind of research? Well, and our future direction. One thing I want to say loud and clear on behalf of all the people who have worked on this project, we want to hear what we should do more. It is not actually very clear right now. So one thing we know we should do is that we should repeat the English Wikipedia survey, the large-scale English Wikipedia survey, in at least 2 other languages. So what we will be doing in the next couple of weeks is preparing another survey. We want to go and see if any of the results that I showed you will change. For example, if we run this survey on Korean versus English. We tried during the span of this research to build prediction models that can predict the motivation of the reader. And this was unsuccessful. We can do a little bit better than random guess. And one of the hypotheses we have here is that basically the issue is that the features we have do not capture the motivations of the users properly. And one thing we observed, which is probably true, is that we are asking people about their motivation on an article, and people can change motivations when they start a session. You will start as a work or school project, but you may end up reading about a movie, which doesn't have anything to do with the project that you have to deliver, right? One thing that we are interested to focus on next is to predict motivation at the article level. And that's something that I would like to hear more from you all about. So suppose for every article, I could show you the distribution of motivations from people who are coming to that article. What would you do with that information? Would it be useful for you to know that only 5% of the people who are coming to read your article are reading it in depth? Would you change anything? Or would it be useful for you that if you know more students read your article than people who are motivated by media? I don't know if it should be useful to you, but like I like to know it. And this is a little bit on the philosophical, but also pragmatic end. What is the movement's role? So now we know that 21% of people who come on English Wikipedia do in-depth reading. What is our role? As people who are working on a mission with a project that has immense implications on what happens on the internet, you can have a role on defining whether this number should be more or less. And you should not overlook that, right? And when I say you, I mean the people who work in the foundation, but I also mainly I'm talking to editors. The content that you provide, the kind of content that you provide can have impact on this number. Do you want people to read more? Then how should we do it? Should we be able to measure this? Should you be able to change content and we measure and tell you how that's changing? These are the things that you should be thinking about. There is another thing. You're probably writing Wikipedia because you want to share the free knowledge and you want people to learn, probably, at least for some of you. Now, if you know, for example, that people do a lot of context switching, if you know that people have come here to learn something and now they're learning something else, do you want to help them to focus or no? What is our educational role here? That's another thing that we should think about. The screen size and content, that's another important thing. We know that many of our users are only on mobile. We know that many of our users will move to mobile more and more. We know that the screen size is small. And the question is, what kind of content do we want to show to the user? So now one thing would be that we say, okay, we know only 21% of people are doing in-depth reading, so let's just cut the article and just show them in snippets of information. But by doing that, we will have impact on how people learn. And this needs to be intentional. We need to understand if we want to encourage people to read more or we want to encourage people to read less. And this is especially critical on smaller screens. And there are many more things that we talk about now on a daily basis when it comes to this project. So my question to you is, what else could we do? And I'll stop here with this, and we can take probably around 10 minutes of questions if you have questions. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the room? Yes.
I hope I didn't miss this as you were talking, Leila, but did you guys walk through any use cases like I know Abby's group has done sometimes? For instance, this person was bored, they were on mobile, they went to something about a movie and try to look at that empathy-based part as part of the motivations. Did you sort of work that all the way through with any of these?
So we didn't look at, we didn't go through any individual responses, right? So pretty much everything that we did was kind of at the algorithmic level, doing at like classes of users and letting the algorithm decide what are the subclasses that are interesting to look at. Now, in the context of the new readers work, I think it would be very interesting to actually go a little bit deeper and just read, like basically print sessions of people, let's say from Mexico, Nigeria, and India. And then let's look at those and then let's see if we can make any other insights out of the information that is available to us. Specifically for Nigeria and Mexico, we don't have that much that many people from these two countries that have participated in the survey, right? So we may need to design follow-up surveys to target these two populations further to get more data out of it. Because basically with 30,000 data points, once you go at the, you start slice and dicing, not much will be left in each category to be able to say something of significance. But I think that's something we should be doing.
Other questions from the audience before I ask my question? Okay, go ahead. It's actually more of a comment. But so you asked what the foundation can do versus what the movement and volunteer contributors can do. And I found specifically the main takeaway on different types of motivation or information needs as a function of the topic to be extremely relevant for the way in which we structure the content of an article. Again, content of an article is not something the Wikimedia Foundation has any control of. This is entirely community driven. There are some aspects related to reading recommendations or the interface that we're in best position probably to address. But it strikes me that when, as a volunteer, I write on a topic, I often don't have any guidance about who am I writing for, what are the needs of my audience, and there are many cases in which decisions about how to structure information, what to put at the top, what to put at the bottom, are really uninformed by data. So actually, I was talking yesterday to James about one case where the decision as to whether or not to put some expert-related information towards the top or the bottom of a medical-related article can actually have some pretty big implications for our audiences, right? So just a comment that I think, to me, that is one of the most promising areas in terms of actionable input for the community.
So I want to comment on this comment. It's a very important point. And it's not an easy point. It may be easy to say what are the motivations of the people who are coming at the article level. So we are going to try that next to see if we can predict. But the tricky part is that suppose I tell you that 80% of the people who are coming to this article are coming for a quick lookup. Is now the conclusion that we need to show quick facts on top of the page? Or the conclusion is that no, these people should actually be reading more of the content and going deeper. And that's the part that is hard. And I'm not saying it's not solvable, but I'm just saying we need to be very mindful about every action that we take based on this knowledge, because this will have implications on how people learn on the internet.
I have a couple questions from IRC. First question is, would it be feasible to repeat the study, but focus on a few articles and track basically the answer distributions over time?
Yeah, so I saw that was from Lodovik. Yeah, so this will be feasible. You tell me which articles. So I'd be happy to talk to you, Lodovik, after the talk to see which articles you're interested in. I can imagine that even in Doc James' case, probably there are medical articles that we can focus on. So I have some ideas in that area. But if there's any specific area that you want to focus on, please bring them up to myself, Ellery, or anybody else who has worked on this project. And we would be happy to think about it, at least brainstorm with you to see where to look more. I do believe that there are articles for which this kind of analysis and information can be useful. For example, if you're providing medical content in certain parts of the world that people won't be able to parse the whole article. What are you going to show on top of the page, right? And we may be able to experiment with interesting things there and learn.
And then we have a sort of suggestion for further work by Zico. So in this work, sort of, we've measured, the depth of information that people need when they enter the article. And so an open question would be, how well does the article satisfy those various needs? And how does the quality class of the article sort of impact how well it satisfies each of those different needs?
Yeah, very good comment, Zico. And I'm happy you're here. You made it. About satisfaction. So we started with the notion of satisfaction, but we gave up. And then we gave up a year ago, but that doesn't mean we're not going to go back to it. The reason for that is it's a little bit hard to ask for people's satisfaction without interfering and making them aware of what they're doing. And then the responses will have that kind of awareness will have impact on the response. So a few ideas that we had talked about was basically one thing websites do. When you land in there, they ask you at the end, we may ask you a few questions. Would you be willing to participate? And that's not very good in our case because that makes the users conscious. The other thing we can do is something like mouse tracking, for example. So you can track the mouse, and as the user wants to close the page completely, you will know that the session is ending, basically. And from those users, you can basically pop something up and ask them, did you get the response for something that you were looking for? Now, mouse tracking is a technology that, I mean, we don't use at the moment, but it's something that I think we should be open to if we have these kind of questions and we want to look at the satisfaction of the users. And then looking at the quality, that was also a very good comment. I think this is something we did not look at right now, partially because the quality levels and differences across languages are different, but that's something we'll make a note of to look into further.
Another question from Giovanni on IRC. So you mentioned that based on just looking at the log data and the features we extracted from that, it was quite difficult to infer people's eventual responses to the survey. So Giovanni is asking, you know, what type of other feature engineering you think would be promising in that direction? Is it possible at all to predict people's survey responses given what's in the logs that we currently collect?
Yeah. So again, Ellery, at least who is on the call, can correct me if I'm wrong. But my understanding at the moment is that we don't have very high hopes for being able to predict motivations for the readers. And again, like part of the reason is that people are switching motivations as they are in a session. So we need to continuously collect information. There may be creative ways for doing this. I can't think of it at the moment, but it's definitely something that we will continue thinking about. And Giovanni, if you have ideas about how we can potentially do this, please let us know.
Yeah, so one idea that we're thinking about exploring in the future that Leila actually mentioned is it seems quite plausible that the article itself holds a lot of information about readers' intentions for visiting. So if we could get sort of enough survey responses for a large sample of articles, maybe we could basically infer what the response distributions would be for articles that we don't have data for. It just seems likely that, you know, an article about you know, a television actress would have a very, you know, the motivation distribution would be like pretty skewed and not as diverse as it is averaging over all articles.
Yeah, Dario here. I just want to make another follow-up comment on this. There are obviously reasons related to research to try and understand if there are features that are highly predictive when it comes to motivation, but there are also actionable aspects of doing this kind of like predictive modeling of readers. And I just want to say that the vast majority of features that were used from a behavioral standpoint for understanding motivation would not be features that can be treated or extracted in real time. Correct me, guys, if I'm wrong, but the amount of like processing of data will be needed to make a real time classification, for example, of readers as a function of motivation, compared to what you just said about the articles, which are fairly static and can be pre-processed, is not something to be used in an actionable way for building better recommendations on the fly, based on the little data that we collect and retain. Can you guys comment on that?
Yeah, I can comment on this. So I think it's fair to say that we're not going to be doing, I'm not sure about able or not. It sounds, if I have to bet, I would say what Dario said is correct. We won't be able to at an online fashion predict motivations of readers as they're in the website. What we can, however, do is that we can let the reader tell us why they're here for. So suppose you're a reader, you know you're here for a work or school project. Tell us that you're here for work or school, and then we can provide services to you that are associated with that. Especially again on the mobile screen, we talk about like preview of the next article. What we show as a preview of the next article, if you tell us why you're here for, that information may be changed based on your motivation. So I don't expect us predicting online the motivations of users, but if there may be things to do if users tell us why they're here for, what they're here for. Casey, did you have a question?
My question was, have we considered, or would it be useful? I mean, I think it might be to include questions about to the users, like how concerned they are with data cost or download time, and if that affects their behavior between maybe how long they stay, what they search for. So within the New Readers Project, affordability is something that we're interested in.
Yeah, definitely. That's something very interesting that in this survey, definitely we didn't touch because the focus was something else. But yes, if you want to decide what kind of content, for example, we show at what part of the page, we need to understand the affordability issue, especially as we go to other countries. And that can have impact on our decision about how to slice and dice content. One more question from the room.
Is it on? Okay. As I recall, Leila, you talked about how the quick checks were desktop and typically were Google to Wikipedia article and then all the way back out. Was that right?
So I think these were for people whose motivation were work and school. They were mostly on desktop and they were going in and out a lot.
And when they came back to Wikipedia, it was also through Google?
I said Google as an example, but for majority of cases is Google. Yes, they will come back from that referrer, which is Google. So in many cases, they're basically just going out, doing a search and coming back. As simple as that.
Yep. And I guess what I wondered was I guess they would be the left brain users, the folks who are browsing and reading and stuff. Were they staying on Wikipedia and were they doing our hyperlinks and our search bar? Were they not going all the way back out?
So I don't know we don't know anything about the type of user beyond the 3 levels that we have, right? So the only thing I can tell you is that for the people who were here motivated by boredom and randomly exploring Wikipedia, these people tend to stay on site.
Ah, okay. So the quick check, they're going all the way in, all the way back out, or many are. And for the browsers, they're staying and reading us like a magazine. They're staying on there.
Right. Correct. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying around. Also started later and you all stick around. Thank you so much. See you next time.